The sunny Saturday morning in Yuma began with Noah Miller standing in front of the mirror in the small bathroom of his rented apartment, trying to decide whether to shave his 3-day stubble before an important conversation. Behind the door, he could hear the sound of a hairdryer. Brenda was getting ready for work at the Desert Rose Salon, where she had been styling the hair of local women for 3 years. Noah ran his hand over his chin and decided to leave the stubble as it was. At 26, he looked older than his age. Years of working on construction sites under the Arizona sun and constant worry about his father, who was serving his 8th year in a prison complex on the outskirts of town, had taken their toll. "Honey, are you ready?" Brenda's voice interrupted his thoughts. She appeared in the doorway, fixing her blonde hair. Despite the early hour, she was already fully ready for work. Her eyes neatly lined, her lipstick subtle, her dress modest and knee-length. "Almost," Noah replied, putting on his shirt. "I'm just thinking about how best to tell him." Brenda came over and adjusted the collar of his shirt. They had been together for 1.5 years, but such gestures still made her feel slightly nervous. The fear of rejection had not gone away, even after Noah had accepted her completely. "We agreed we'd just say we want to get married," she said softly. "Nothing complicated." Noah nodded, but his eyes betrayed his anxiety. Lance Miller was a man of old-fashioned views, raised in a family of builders where the man worked with his hands and the woman ran the household. 8 years in prison had only reinforced his traditional ideas about what a proper family should look like. "He'll be happy," Brenda added, though she wasn't sure herself. "He'll have a daughter-in-law, grandchildren in the future." Noah put his arm around her shoulders. "Of course he will. He just wants me to be happy." At the same time, 40 miles away, at the Arizona State Prison Complex, Lance Miller was finishing his morning shift in the prison laundry. At 52, he still looked like a strong man. Daily workouts in the prison yard kept him in shape, and his gray hair and wrinkles only added to the severity of his face. The laundry work was monotonous, but Lance preferred it to other options. It was quieter here, there were fewer conflicts, and he could think about the future, and there was a lot to think about. Noah had finally found a girlfriend and was planning to get married. "Miller," called his supervisor Rodriguez. "Your appointment is at 2 o'clock, don't forget." Lance nodded. Mike Rodriguez had been working here for 6 years and treated the prisoners fairly, but without excessive leniency. Lance respected people like that. They did their job without sadism, but also without sentimentality. Returning to his cell, Lance thought about the upcoming meeting. Noah had promised to bring his girlfriend, the very same Brenda he had been talking about for the past few months. Lance knew a little about her. She worked as a hairdresser, was a good cook, and took care of Noah. That was enough to approve of her, but Lance wanted to see her eyes, to understand what she was really like. In prison, he had learned to read people at a glance. Here, it was a matter of survival. The weak broke down in the first few months, the cunning tried to play their games, and the strong found their place and held their own. Lance belonged to the latter category. His cell was Spartan but clean. 2 bunks, a metal table, a few books on a shelf. His cellmate Tommy was serving his last months for fraud and spent most of his time silent, which suited Lance just fine. There were 2 photos on the wall, one old, with Noah still a teenager, and one recent, sent a month ago, with his son standing next to a house under construction with a satisfied smile. "Good job, kid," Tommy remarked, noticing where Lance was looking. "Yeah, he's good with his hands," Lance agreed. "Not like some young people." Lance was proud of his son. Noah hadn't gone down the wrong path, gotten involved with drugs, or dropped out of school. Instead, he had trained as a builder, found a stable job, and was now even planning to start a family. Everything was going as it should. The time until goodbye dragged on slowly. Lance took a shower, changed into a clean prison uniform, and combed his hair. He wanted to look presentable in front of his future daughter-in-law. The mirror above the sink reflected the face of a man who had seen a lot, but had not been broken. The scar above his right eyebrow was a reminder of a fight in the first months of his imprisonment, when he did not yet understand the rules of prison. Lance visited the visiting room every 2 weeks. Noah came regularly, sometimes bringing news about work, sometimes just sitting and talking about life. These meetings were the only thing that connected Lance to the outside world. Officer Rodriguez led him to table number 7, their usual spot by the window. The room was large, with 24 tables where prisoners met with their relatives. It was always noisy here, children screaming, women crying, men talking in hushed voices about business. Lance sat down and waited. A few minutes later, the door opened and Noah entered. Behind him was a woman, slender, fair-haired, wearing a modest blue dress. She carried herself with confidence, but Lance noticed a slight tension in her movements. "Hi, Dad," Noah said, hugging his father across the table. "Meet Brenda." Brenda extended her hand. "It's very nice to meet you, Mr. Miller. Noah has told me so much about you." Lance shook her hand. A firm handshake, a direct gaze. Good signs. "Just Lance," he said. "Sit down. Tell me how you're doing." The next hour was spent in pleasant conversation. Brenda talked about her work at the salon, how she met Noah, their plans for the future. She was smart and tactful, didn't ask awkward questions about prison, but showed genuine interest in Lance's life. "Do you have family in Yuma?" Lance asked. "No, my parents live in Phoenix," Brenda replied. "We don't talk very often." Lance nodded understandingly. Many young people left their parents and sought their own path. That was normal. "Well," Noah said as the visit was coming to an end, "we have some news." Lance raised his eyebrows in anticipation. "We want to get married," Noah continued, taking Brenda's hand. "Next year, when we've saved up some money." Lance looked at them both. His son was beaming with happiness, and Brenda looked at him with hope and slight apprehension. "That's wonderful news," Lance said slowly. "I'm happy for you." Brenda smiled with relief, and Noah squeezed his father's hand. "We wanted you to be the first to know," Brenda added. "Your opinion is very important to Noah." "And to me too," Lance said sincerely. "Welcome to the family." When the visit was over and Noah and Brenda left, Lance sat for a few more minutes, thinking about the meeting. The girl had made a good impression on him. She was well-mannered, hard-working, and sincerely loved his son. What else did you need for family happiness? Returning to his cell, Lance was already making plans. He wanted Noah to have a decent wedding, maybe even take out a mortgage on a house. The guy had a good job, and now he would have a good wife. Everything was falling into place. The only thing that bothered Lance a little was how little Brenda had told him about her past. But many people preferred not to talk about difficult times, especially when meeting someone for the first time. That was understandable. 3 days after the prison visit, Brenda couldn't shake her feeling of unease. She sat in the Desert Rose salon, cutting the hair of her regular client, Mrs. Patricia, but her thoughts kept returning to Lance Miller's piercing gaze. The man was clearly good at reading people, and Brenda was afraid he might suspect something. "Darling, you seem distracted today," remarked Mrs. Patricia, an elderly retired teacher who had been coming to Brenda every 2 weeks for over a year. "I'm sorry, I'm just thinking a lot about wedding plans," Brenda replied, focusing on her work. "Oh, how exciting! When is the celebration?" "Next fall. We want to get everything organized." Mrs. Patricia smiled in the mirror. Wise. "Do the groom's parents approve?" Brenda paused for a moment, then continued cutting. "Yes, we just met. Everything went well." She didn't lie, but she didn't tell the whole truth either. The meeting had indeed gone well, but Brenda knew it was only because Lance didn't know the most important thing about her, and she wasn't sure if she should ever tell him. In the evening, when the salon closed, Brenda drove home to Noah. He rented a small apartment in the old part of Yuma, not far from downtown. The house was built in the 1960s, with thick walls that kept it cool on hot summer days. Noah was already home, cooking dinner in the small kitchen. The smell of roasted chicken filled the apartment, creating a cozy, homey atmosphere. "How was your day?" he asked, hugging her. "Fine. Lots of clients before the weekend." Brenda snuggled up to him, enjoying the feeling of security in his arms. "Have you thought more about what your father said? About telling him more about my past?" Noah pulled away and looked at her seriously. "Brenda, we've already discussed this. You don't have to tell anyone anything, especially not him. But he's your father. If we're going to get married, then it's our decision." Noah interrupted her. "And our life. What happened before we met is your business alone." Brenda nodded, but her anxiety remained. She loved Noah for accepting her completely, without questions or judgment. When she decided to tell him the truth about her past, about who she used to be, a year and a half ago, Noah listened calmly and said only, "You are you." The rest doesn't matter, but his father was a different person. Lance Miller had grown up in a different time with different ideas about what was right and wrong, and 8 years in prison certainly hadn't made him more tolerant of differences. Brenda thought about this while they were having dinner, watching TV and going to bed. Noah sensed her unease but didn't pressure her, knowing she would tell him when she was ready. In the morning, while Noah was in the shower, Brenda took an old shoebox out of the closet, which she had kept on the top shelf. Inside were photographs, documents, and letters, everything that remained of her former life. Photos from high school, when she was still Brandon. A certificate of change of documents. Letters from her parents, who at first didn't understand, then got angry, and then just stopped writing. The transition began 4 years ago when she was 20. Long months of hormone therapy, surgery, and psychological sessions. The hardest part was not the physical changes, but finding her place in the world, learning to be who she felt she was. The first years in Yuma were difficult. The small town was not always ready to accept people like her. But gradually, people got used to her, especially when they saw that Brenda was hard-working and didn't hurt anyone. The Desert Rose Salon became a real home for her, and the owner, Dolores, was almost like a mother. "What are you thinking about?" Noah came out of the bathroom, drying his hair with a towel. Brenda quickly put the box away. "Oh, work." Noah didn't believe her, but he didn't insist. He was getting dressed for work. Old jeans, work boots, a desert construction t-shirt. This week, their crew was finishing a shopping center on the outskirts of town. "See you tonight," he kissed her goodbye. "Maybe we can go to the movies?" "Sure," Brenda smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. Meanwhile, in prison, Lance Miller was starting another day of his sentence. Wake up at 6 in the morning, breakfast in the dining room, work in the laundry room, a routine that kept him in check and kept him from going crazy. In the laundry room, he worked with Ricky Vasquez, a guy 23 years younger than him. Ricky was serving time for drug dealing and was due to be released in 6 months. He was a smart kid, though hot-headed. In prison, they became something like mentor and protege. "Miller, I hear your son's getting married," Ricky said as he loaded another batch of laundry. "Yes, she's a good girl. I met her the other day." "And what do you think of her?" Lance thought for a moment. "She seems normal, hardworking, well-mannered. She loves my son, and that's the main thing." "What's her family like?" "She said she's not very close to her parents. They're from Phoenix." Ricky nodded. "It happens. Many young people run away from their families. They seek freedom." Lance didn't answer, but the thought stuck in his head. Why was a young woman from a good family in Phoenix alone in Little Yuma? Usually, people went in the opposite direction, from small towns to big cities, in search of better opportunities. "Vasquez," he said after a while, "do you still have connections in Phoenix?" "Some." "Why?" "Just thinking about my future daughter-in-law. I want to know what kind of family she comes from." Ricky looked at him intently. "Don't you trust her?" "It's not that I don't trust her. It's just that a father should know who is joining his family. I see. I can ask around if you want. Torres, you said? Lance nodded. In prison, information was currency, and Ricky had good connections on the outside. If there was anything important in Brenda's past, he would find out. After work, Lance went to the gym. He spent an hour there every day, keeping in shape. Physical activity helped him cope with the stress of incarceration and prepare for life after release. At the gym, he ran into Martin Kraus, an old acquaintance from his previous life. Martin was serving time for fraud and was one of the few people here Lance could talk to openly. "Heard you have some good news," Martin said, pumping iron. "Yeah, my son's getting married. The time has come." "Is she a good girl?" "So far, yes, but I want to be sure." Martin nodded understandingly. "Right. There are a lot of unusual people these days. You never know who you're dealing with." Those words echoed in Lance's head. Times had indeed changed. What was once unthinkable was now commonplace. People changed their gender. Men married men. Women married women. Lance wasn't a religious fanatic, but he believed there was a certain natural order to things. That evening, in his cell, he thought about his meeting with Brenda. Something about her bothered him, but he couldn't figure out what it was. Maybe it was her overly confident behavior for a young woman from the countryside, or her overly cautious answers to simple questions about her past. Tommy, his cellmate, was reading a book on his bunk, paying no attention to Lance's thoughts. That was one of Tommy's strengths. He didn't meddle in other people's business. The next day, Noah called his father, as he usually did on Wednesdays. "Hi, Dad. How are you?" "Fine. Working, playing sports. How are you?" "Everything's fine. Brenda says hi. She's very happy that you met." "Yes, I liked her," Lance said cautiously. "Tell me, son, does she talk to her parents often?" "Not really. You know how it is. Some families aren't very close." "I understand. How long has she been in Yuma?" "About 3.5 years. Why, Dad?" "No reason. Just curious. I want to get to know my daughter-in-law better." Noah laughed. "Are you a detective or something?" "She's a good girl, Dad. Hard-working, kind. She loves me. What more could you want?" "You're right, son. The main thing is that you're happy." But after the conversation, Lance continued to think. 3.5 years ago, Brenda was 22 or 21, just the age when young people finish college and start their independent lives. But why did she choose Yuma? There aren't many opportunities for a young woman here. The next day, Ricky approached him during lunch break. "Miller, I have some information about your sister-in-law." Lance was alert. "What did you find out?" "The Torres family in Phoenix really exists. But here's the interesting thing. They had a son, Brandon, not a daughter." Lance's heart began to race. "What are you trying to say?" "I'm telling you, this guy Brandon disappeared from home 5 years ago. His parents searched for him and then suddenly stopped. They say he's no longer their son." Lance felt the blood rush to his head. "Are you sure about this information?" 100%. I have reliable people there. This Brandon worked in a car repair shop until he disappeared. Before that, he was seeing some doctors and taking hormones. Lance couldn't believe what he was hearing. His future daughter-in-law was... He couldn't even say it to himself. "Thanks for the information," he said to Ricky. "I owe you one." "Come on, we're friends." "But what are you going to do?" Lance didn't answer. He got up and went to his cell, feeling rage rising in his chest. His son, his only son, was going to marry this woman, and he didn't even know about it. Or did he? That thought was even worse than the first. In his cell, Lance sat down on his bunk and tried to calm down. Maybe the information was inaccurate. Maybe it was other Teresa's. But deep down, he knew Ricky wasn't wrong. There were too many coincidences. Now he understood why Brenda had said so little about her past. Why she had left Phoenix. Why her parents didn't talk to her. It all made sense. But what to do now? How to tell his son? And should he tell him? Lance spent a sleepless night thinking about the situation. By morning, he had made a decision. First, he had to see for himself, look Brenda in the eye, and find out if she was really deceiving his son. Then he would decide what to do next. 2 weeks had passed since Lance learned the truth about Brenda. 2 weeks during which he had hardly slept, could not eat properly, and had difficulty concentrating on his work. The information he had received from Ricky stuck in his head like a splinter, causing constant pain. In the laundry room, he worked like a machine, mechanically loading laundry into the machines and folding the clean ones. The other inmates noticed his condition but wisely kept their distance. Lance Miller had never been a man to joke around with, and now he exuded such a dark energy that even the most desperate preferred to give him a wide berth. "Miller, you look like shit," Ricky said during lunch break, sitting down next to him in the cafeteria. Lance gave him a heavy look. "Thanks for the information, Vasquez. That really helps. Look, I understand it's hard, but maybe you should talk to your son, explain the situation. And what am I supposed to say? That his fiancée used to be a man?" Lance's voice was full of bitterness. "That he's going to marry this person?" Ricky shrugged awkwardly. At 29, he belonged to a generation for whom such things were not unimaginable, but he understood that for Lance, this was a blow to the gut. "Maybe he knows," Ricky suggested cautiously. Lance shook his head. "No. I saw his eyes when he talked about her. He's genuinely in love. He thinks he's found the perfect woman. Then he needs to tell him the truth. What if he doesn't believe me? Or what if he believes me but marries her anyway?" Lance clenched his fists. "I can't let that happen. I can't let him ruin his life." Ricky looked at him intently. "What are you planning, Miller?" But Lance just shook his head and got up from the table. He didn't know exactly what he was going to do yet, but he knew he couldn't just sit there and do nothing. At the same time, Brenda was feeling increasingly anxious in Yuma. She couldn't explain why, but for the past few days she had felt like she was being watched. Several times when leaving the salon, she noticed an unfamiliar man standing near the coffee shop across the street. When she looked back, he disappeared. "Maybe you're just overtired," Noah suggested when she told him about her fears. They were sitting in their favorite Mexican restaurant, El Corazon, having dinner after work. "Maybe," Brenda agreed, but her anxiety remained. "Noah, what if your father finds out something about me?" Noah put down his fork. What could he find out? And even if he did, it wouldn't change anything. I love you just the way you are, but he might not understand. People of his generation. Brenda, listen to me. Noah took her hand. My father has had a difficult life. He's seen a lot, and if he accepted you once, he'll accept you again. And if not, that's his problem, not ours. Brenda nodded, but deep down, she knew it wasn't that simple. Lance Miller struck her as a man with clear ideas about what was right and wrong, and she wasn't sure that a transgender daughter-in-law would fit into his worldview. That evening, after Noah fell asleep, Brenda sat by the window for a long time, looking out at the empty street. Yuma was a quiet town where everyone knew each other, and news spread quickly. It had taken her 3 years to become part of this community, to earn people's trust and respect. Now, she had to defend it. The next day, Noah called his father with an unexpected proposal. "Dad, what if we come visit you again next weekend?" Brenda wants to get to know the family better. Lance, who was just thinking about how to arrange another meeting, felt that fate was coming to meet him. "Of course, son. I'd love to see you both great. How about we stay a little longer this time? We have things to talk about." "Yes, we do," Lance agreed, and there was steel in his voice that Noah didn't hear. After the conversation, Lance sat in his cell, thinking about the upcoming meeting. This time, he would know who he was dealing with. This time, he would be able to look this Brenda in the eye and see the lie. "Miller, have you heard the news?" Tommy entered the cell looking unusually animated. He was usually quiet, but today something clearly excited him. What news? Vasquez is being released early, next week. Good behavior plus prison overcrowding. Lance raised his eyebrows. That changed things. Ricky would be free sooner than planned. That evening in the gym, he found Ricky behind the barbell. "I heard you're getting out," Lance said. "Yeah, lucky me. In a week, I'll be breathing free air." Ricky smiled, but noticed the seriousness in Lance's eyes. "Something wrong?" "No, everything's fine. It's just going to be weird without you." "Hang in there, Miller. Your release isn't that far off." Lance nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. Ricky's freedom meant opportunities. Opportunities that he himself didn't have. The next day, he asked Ricky for a private meeting. They talked in a quiet, uncrowded corner of the library. "Vasquez, I want to ask you a favor. I'm listening. When you get out, can you do something for me?" Ricky looked at him intently. "Depends on what it is." "Nothing specific yet. Just keep an eye on my son and his girlfriend. I don't like this situation." Looking after is a broad concept. Lance paused, choosing his words carefully. "I'm an old-fashioned man, Ricky. For me, family is sacred, and what this woman is doing to my son is wrong." "What do you want me to do?" "Nothing for now. Just be ready to help if needed." I won't forget this. Ricky knew that debts in prison were a serious matter, and that Lance Miller was not the type to forget favors. But he also felt that the conversation was about more than just surveillance. "Okay, Miller, but if it's something serious, we'll talk separately." "Sure, thanks." On Friday evening, Noah and Brenda were getting ready for their trip to the prison. Brenda was more nervous than usual, changing her outfit several times. "Do you think this is too bright?" she asked, showing him a red dress. "You always look beautiful," Noah replied, but he noticed her anxiety. "Honey, what's bothering you?" "I don't know. I just have a feeling this meeting will be different from the first one." "Why?" Brenda couldn't explain. It was more of an intuitive sense of danger that she had learned not to ignore over her years as a transgender woman. "Maybe we should postpone it," she suggested. "Brenda, Dad is waiting for us, and he'll be upset if we don't show up. He sounded tense on the phone recently." That didn't reassure Brenda, but she nodded. Noah was right. Canceling at the last minute would be rude. On Saturday morning, they drove to the prison. The drive took about an hour, and they rode in silence for most of the way. Noah could feel Brenda's tension, but he didn't know how to calm her down. "Everything will be fine," he said as they pulled up to the prison complex. Brenda looked at the gray walls and barbed wire. "I hope so." The security check went as usual. Brenda went through the metal detector, handed over her purse for storage, and received a visitor's pass. But each step seemed more ominous to her than the last time. In the visiting room, they took the same table, number 7, by the window. There were few other visitors. Saturday morning was not a popular time for visits. Lance appeared a few minutes later. Outwardly, he looked the same as before, but Brenda immediately noticed a change in his eyes. His gaze had become cold, scrutinizing, almost predatory. "Hi, Dad." Noah hugged his father. "Hello, Mr. Miller." Brenda extended her hand, but noticed that Lance's handshake was less warm than last time. "Brenda," he said her name as if tasting it. "How's the salon?" "Fine, thanks. Lots of work before the holidays." Lance nodded and sat down. His posture was tense, like a predator ready to pounce. "Tell me, Brenda, I've been thinking about our last conversation. You mentioned that your parents live in Phoenix." "Yes, that's right." "What are their names? Maybe I know them. I used to do business in Phoenix back in the day." Brenda felt her heart beat faster. "Manuel and Rosita Torres, but we're not very close." "I see. Do you have any brothers or sisters?" "No, I'm an only child." Lance nodded slowly. "An only child. Interesting." Noah noticed the strange tone in his father's voice. "Dad, is something wrong?" "No, son. I just want to get to know my daughter-in-law better. After all, she'll soon be part of our family. The word daughter-in-law was spoken with a special intonation, and Brenda realized that something had changed. Lance knew. She didn't understand how, but he knew the truth about her. "Brenda, how long have you been working as a hairdresser?" Lance continued his questioning. 3 years. I studied in Phoenix and then moved to Yuma. And what made you choose Yuma?" It's not the biggest city for a young woman. Brenda felt her palms getting sweaty. "I like small towns. It's quieter here." "Yes, it's quiet here. Everyone knows each other. News travels fast." Lance leaned forward. "It's hard to keep secrets in a place like this." "Dad, you're talking in riddles," Noah interjected. "What secrets?" Lance stared at Brenda for a long time, and she saw cold hatred in his eyes. "Everyone has secrets, son. The question is whether people are willing to be honest with those they love." The tension at the table became palpable. Brenda knew the game was over, but she didn't know what to do next. "Mr. Miller, if you have questions for me, ask them directly," she said, trying to remain calm. Lance smirked. "Okay. Here's a direct question. Who are you really, Brenda Torres?" "I am who I say I am. A woman who loves your son." "A woman?" Lance said the word with disgust. "Are you sure?" Noah jumped up from his chair. "Dad, what's going on?" "What are you talking about?" But Lance didn't take his eyes off Brenda. "Ask your fiancée, son. Let her tell you who she was before she became Brenda Torres." Brenda turned pale. The secret she had kept so carefully had been revealed, and judging by the look on Lance's face, the consequences would be disastrous. "Visiting time is over," announced the guard. Lance stood up, his eyes fixed on Brenda. "We'll talk." "We'll definitely talk," Noah and Brenda were silent as they left the prison. Only in the car did Noah explode. "What was that? What was he talking about?" Brenda sat staring at the windshield. "Noah, I need to tell you something." In prison, Lance returned to his cell in a cold rage. Now he had no doubts. This woman had deceived his son, playing a role she had no right to play, and he couldn't let it continue. He sat down on his bunk and took out a piece of paper. He needed to write a letter to Ricky, who was being released on Monday. A letter with a very important request. Tuesday, October 15th, 6:47 a.m. Brenda Torres left her apartment on Madison Street, heading to work at the Desert Rose Salon. She didn't notice the gray Ford pickup truck that was slowly following her 2 blocks behind. At the wheel was Ricky Vasquez, who had been released from prison just 2 days earlier. In the pocket of his denim jacket was a letter from Lance Miller, a short but clear message about the need to take care of the daughter-in-law before she completely ruins Noah's life. Brenda was walking her usual route through the small Sunnyside Park, where no one was around early in the morning except for a few joggers. Ricky knew this route. He had studied her routine for 3 days in a row. When Brenda turned toward the old gazebo deep in the park, where she liked to stop to drink coffee from her thermos and collect her thoughts, Ricky parked his pickup truck and followed her. "Brenda?" he called, stepping out from behind the trees. She turned around, not recognizing the stranger. "Yes? Who are you?" "A friend of the Miller family," Ricky said, coming closer. "We need to talk." Brenda's eyes flashed with alarm. "Talk about what?" "I don't know you, but I know you. I know who you really are." Brenda took a step back. "I don't understand what you're talking about." "Brandon Torres from Phoenix. Does that ring a bell?" Brenda's face paled. She tried to run away, but Ricky was faster and stronger. In a brief struggle near the gazebo, Brenda Torres suffered fatal injuries from the knife Ricky had taken out of his pocket. 20 minutes later, Ricky was already leaving Yuma, heading toward the Mexican border. In his pocket was $2,000, money that Lance had asked him to give to his old friends on the outside. At 7:15 a.m., elderly jogger Robert Chen discovered the body in Sunnyside Park. The call came into the Yuma Police Department at 7:22. Detective Sarah Connolly arrived at the scene at 7:45. At 38, She was one of the most experienced investigators in the department, specializing in violent crimes. Tall, with short dark hair and attentive brown eyes, she had a reputation as a meticulous and impartial detective. "What do we have?" she asked Officer James Martinez, who was the first to arrive on the scene. "Female, 24 years old, ID in the name of Brenda Torres. Multiple stab wounds appears to have occurred around 7 a.m., discovered by a retiree during his morning jog." Connolly put on gloves and carefully examined the scene. The body lay near an old wooden gazebo off the main paths of the park. There were minimal signs of a struggle, a few broken branches, footprints on the ground. "Has anyone contacted the family yet?" "We're trying to find her contacts. She lives alone in her apartment, but her neighbors say she has a boyfriend, Noah Miller." Connolly wrote the name in her notebook. "Find him. And find out where she worked." Forensic technician Tom Rivera was already photographing the crime scene and collecting evidence. "Detective, it looks like a planned attack. The killer knew where to find her. What makes you think that?" "The location is too secluded for a random crime, and the time, early in the morning, when the park is almost empty. Someone studied her routine." Connolly nodded. That matched her first impression. "Did you find the weapon?" "No, the killer took it with him. But from the wounds, we can tell it was a fixed blade knife, probably a hunting knife." At 9:30 a.m., Connolly arrived at the Desert Rose Salon on Main Street. The owner, Dolores Rodriguez, a 50-year-old woman with a kind face, cried when she heard the news. "It can't be," she repeated. "Brenda was such a good girl. Who could have done this?" "Mrs. Rodriguez, tell me about Brenda. Did she have any enemies? Any problems?" "No problems. She was hardworking and polite to customers. Everyone loved her." "What about her personal life?" "She had a boyfriend, Noah, a nice young man. They were planning to get married." Connolly wrote down every word. "Did she ever mention any threats? Did she say she was afraid of anyone?" Dolores thought for a moment. "She had been a little nervous in the last few weeks. She said she felt like she was being followed, but I thought it was just pre-wedding jitters." "Followed?" "Yes. She saw an unfamiliar man near the salon several times, but when she looked back, he was gone." This was important information. Connolly asked Dolores to describe everything she could remember about Brenda's recent behavior. At 11 a.m., she met with Noah Miller at the construction site where he worked. The news of his fiancée's death shocked him. "It's impossible," he repeated, sitting in the foreman's office. "Who could have killed Brenda? She had no enemies." "Mr. Miller, when was the last time you saw Miss Torres?" "Last night. We had dinner at home and watched a movie. Everything was fine." "Did she mention that she was afraid of someone? That she was being followed?" Noah wiped his eyes with the sleeve of his work shirt. "Yes, she had been worried lately. She said she saw a man near the salon. I suggested going to the police, but she said it was just paranoia." "Tell me about your relationship. How long had you been together?" "A year and a half. We were planning to get married next fall." Connolly noticed that Noah looked not only upset, but also confused, as if he were hiding something important. "Mr. Miller, were there any problems in your relationship? Arguments, misunderstandings?" Noah paused. "On Saturday, we went to visit my father in prison. The meeting was strange. He asked Brenda very personal questions, as if he suspected something. "Is your father incarcerated?" "Yes, in the Arizona State Prison Complex. Lance Miller. He's been there for 8 years." Connolly wrote down the information. "And what happened during the visit?" "My father was hostile. He hinted that Brenda had secrets. She was very upset after that." "What secrets?" Noah paused for a long time, struggling with himself. "Detective, it's hard to explain. Brenda wasn't always. She was born in a different body." Connolly raised her eyebrows. "She's transgender?" "Yes, but it didn't matter to me. I loved her for who she was." "Did your father know about this?" "Not from us. But somehow he found out. And during our meeting, he made it clear that he knew the truth." That changed things. Connolly realized that the motive for the murder could be related to transphobia or family conflicts. Mr. Miller, does your father have any connections on the outside? People who could act on his behalf? I don't know. He didn't talk about it. But he's been in for a long time, so maybe he has acquaintances who have been released. At 2 p.m., Connolly returned to the office and began studying Lance Miller's case. Armed robbery in 2017, sentenced to 15 years. Before his arrest, he worked in construction, was married, divorced in 2015. No links to organized crime in official documents. She contacted the prison complex and asked for a list of recently released prisoners who could have been in contact with Lance Miller. Prison Administrator Mike provided the information. Enrique Vasquez, also known as Ricky, was released last week. He was in for drugs and was Miller's cellmate for several months. Do you have his address? Officially, he was supposed to register with his parole officer in Phoenix, but he hasn't shown up yet. Connolly asked for a bulletin to be issued for Ricky Vasquez. He was their first serious suspect. That evening, she received a call from forensic scientist Rivera. Detective, we have something interesting. Tire tracks from a 2018 to 2020 Ford pickup truck were found at the crime scene, and a witness saw a gray pickup truck leaving the park around 7:30 a.m. Description of the driver? Male, Hispanic, 25 to 30 years old. No more specific description. Connolly looked at a photo of Ricky Vasquez from the prison database. 29 years old, Hispanic, released 3 days ago. The coincidence was too obvious. The next day, she went to the prison to talk to Lance Miller. The meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the interrogation room. Lance looked calm and collected. Upon learning of Brenda's death, he showed no emotion. "I'm sorry about your son," he said. "Losing someone close to you is always difficult." "Mr. Miller, I understand you had a tense meeting with Miss Torres on Saturday." "I wouldn't say tense. I just learned some facts about her past." "What facts?" Lance shrugged. "That she wasn't who she claimed to be. My son had a right to know the truth, and you felt you had the right to interfere in their relationship? I'm a father. Of course, I have the right to protect my son from deception." Connolly studied his face, trying to find signs of deception. "Where were you yesterday morning between 6 and 8? Lance smirked. "In jail, detective. I have an ironclad alibi for the last 8 years. Do you have any acquaintances on the outside who could help you deal with your unwanted daughter-in-law?" "I don't understand what you're talking about." "Ricky Vasquez, your former cellmate." For the first time, something resembling concern flashed in Lance's eyes. "Vasquez was released. I don't know where he is now." "But you talked to him?" "We shared a cell for several months. Of course we talked." "And what did you discuss?" "The usual stuff. Work. Plans for the future." Connolly knew she didn't have enough evidence to accuse Lance of organizing the murder. But the connection between Ricky's release and Brenda's death was too obvious to be a coincidence. As she left the prison, she was already planning her next steps. She needed to find Ricky Vasquez and find out if Lance had received any letters or phone calls that might have contained instructions. The case promised to be difficult, but Connolly was confident that sooner or later she would find evidence linking the father in prison to the murder of his son's sister-in-law. Thursday, October 17th, 6:15 a.m. Border Patrol officers detained Ricky Vasquez 20 miles from the Mexican border near the city of San Luis. He was driving a stolen Ford pickup truck and tried to flee when he saw the patrol car. Detective Sarah Connolly received a call at 7 a.m. and immediately drove to the scene of the arrest. Ricky was in a Border Patrol holding cell, looking nervous and constantly demanding a lawyer. "Enrique Vasquez?" Connolly entered the interrogation room where the suspect was sitting. "I need a lawyer," was Ricky's only response. "Okay, that's your right. But first, let me tell you what you're being charged with." Connolly opened the case file. First-degree murder of Brenda Torres, carjacking, violation of parole. Ricky turned pale. I don't know any Brenda Torres. But you know Lance Miller, your former cellmate. We just shared a cell for a few months. Connolly placed photos from the crime scene on the table. A 24-year-old woman was killed on Tuesday morning, multiple stab wounds. A witness saw a gray Ford pickup truck leaving the scene. Ricky turned away from the photos. That's not me. The same pickup truck you were arrested in at the border. DNA analysis from the crime scene will take a few days, but I'm sure we'll find a match. I want a lawyer. Connolly nodded. Of course. In the meantime, consider this. First-degree murder in Arizona can mean the death penalty, but cooperating with the investigation can significantly mitigate the sentence. She left the room, leaving Ricky alone with his thoughts. Experience had shown that giving a suspect time to think was often more effective than pressure. Meanwhile, at police headquarters, Connolly met with Yuma County Prosecutor David Harris to discuss the case strategy. What do we have so far? Harris asked, reviewing the materials. The suspect has been apprehended with physical evidence, a stolen car that was seen at the scene of the crime. We have a motive, a family conflict over the victim's transgender identity. The connection between the organizer in prison and the perpetrator has been established. But there's no direct evidence yet that the murder was premeditated? Not yet, but I'm working on it. Harris nodded. Focus on getting a confession from Vasquez. That's our best chance of getting to the organizer. After meeting with the prosecutor, Connolly went to the prison to talk to Lance Miller again. This time, she brought a warrant to seize all of his prison correspondence and phone records from the past month. Lance greeted her with the same calmness as last time, but Connolly noticed the tension in his posture. Mr. Miller, your friend Ricky has been arrested. Lance's expression didn't change. That's his problem. He's been arrested for the murder of Brenda Torres. That's unfortunate to hear, but I don't see how that concerns me. Connolly placed the warrant on the table. We have permission to seize all your correspondence and call records. If you gave him instructions, we'll find them. For the first time, Lance looked concerned. Detective, you're wasting your time. I'm in prison. How could I organize a murder? Criminals in prison organize crimes on the outside every day. Money, connections, influence, none of that disappears behind bars. Lance was silent, thinking about the situation. Your son Noah lost the woman he loved, Connolly continued. He's desperate. Was it really worth it? My son avoided a huge mistake, Lance said coldly. Sooner or later, he'll realize that. So you really think she deserved to die? I didn't say anything about death, but deception must have consequences. Connolly recorded every word. It wasn't a direct admission, but it showed motive and a lack of remorse. On Friday morning, Ricky's lawyer, a young public defender named Maria Sanchez, met with her client. After a 2-hour conversation, she contacted Detective Connolly. My client is willing to cooperate in exchange for a plea bargain, she said over the phone. What kind of deal does he want? Second-degree murder instead of first-degree, 20 to 25 years. Connolly discussed the offer with the prosecutor. Given the importance of the testimony against the organizer, Harris agreed to negotiate. On Saturday morning, Ricky Vasquez was officially questioned in the presence of his lawyer and the prosecutor. Mr. Vasquez, tell us about your relationship with Lance Miller, Connolly began. Ricky swallowed nervously. We shared a cell for 4 months. Lance was like a mentor, helping me stay away from the bad guys in prison. And what changed before your release? About a week before he was released, he started talking about his son and his girlfriend. He said she was cheating on his son, that she wasn't a real woman. Did he ask you for anything? At first, he just asked me to look after them after his release, to make sure his son was okay. And then, Ricky looked at his lawyer and got an approving nod. After that visit, when he saw this girl, he was very angry. He wrote me a note, which he passed on through another inmate. What was in the note? He wrote that this woman would ruin Noah's life, that she was sick and dangerous, and that the problem needed to be solved. What did solve the problem mean? I understood that he wanted me to scare her, to make her leave town. But you killed her. Ricky lowered his head. She refused to leave. She said she loved Noah and wasn't going anywhere. She started screaming, trying to attract attention. I didn't want to kill her, but she threatened to call the police. Did Lance pay you for this? He gave me the contact details of people who gave me the money. $2,000. This was exactly the testimony Connolly needed. Ricky described a system of transferring money through intermediaries, which was typical for crimes organized from prison. On Monday, the prosecution charged Lance Miller with first-degree murder. When he was brought into the courtroom to hear the charges, he looked defeated for the first time. Noah was present at the hearing, sitting in the front row behind the barrier. His face expressed pain and incomprehension. In the week since Brenda's death, he had aged years. "Lance Miller," the judge announced, "you are charged with first-degree murder. How do you plead?" Lance was silent for a long time, looking at his son. Then he said quietly, "Guilty." Silence fell over the courtroom. Even his lawyer looked surprised. "Mr. Miller, do you understand the consequences of your plea?" asked the judge. "I do, Your Honor." The judge set sentencing for a month later. Lance was taken back to jail, and Noah ran out of the courtroom, unable to bear what was happening any longer. Connolly caught up with him on the steps of the courthouse. "Mr. Miller, I'm so sorry." Noah wiped away his tears. "I don't understand. How could he do that? Brenda was a good person. She never hurt anyone. Some people can't accept anything that differs from their idea of normal. But she was my family. We loved each other." Connolly put her hand on his shoulder. "Love has no boundaries, Mr. Miller. What you felt for Brenda was real. No one can change that." A month later, the court sentenced Lance Miller to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Ricky Vasquez received 25 years in prison for second-degree murder as part of a plea bargain. Brenda's parents from Phoenix were present at the sentencing. Manuel and Rosita Torres had not spoken to their daughter for several years, but her death forced them to reconsider their views. "We lost her twice," Rosita told reporters after the hearing. "First, when we couldn't accept her choice, and now forever. If we had supported her then, maybe things would have been different." Noah was not present at the sentencing. According to friends, he sold his apartment in Yuma and moved to another state, unable to remain in the city where the tragedy occurred. Detective Connolly closed the case, but it haunted her for a long time. She had seen a lot of cruelty in her work as a police officer, but cases where hatred destroyed families from within were particularly painful. Dolores Rodriguez, owner of the Desert Rose Salon, organized a memorial evening for Brenda. Dozens of people attended: salon clients, neighbors, Noah's colleagues. They all remembered Brenda as a kind, hard-working woman who never hurt anyone. "She just wanted to be happy," Dolores told the gathering. "She wanted to love and be loved." Is that too much to ask? In prison, Lance Miller was transferred to a block for particularly dangerous criminals. His former acquaintances avoided him. A murder motivated by transphobia did not add to his authority, even in the criminal world. He wrote letters to Noah, but his son did not read them. All the letters were returned with the note, "The addressee does not live at this address." 6 months after the verdict, Lance received the only reply to his letters. A short note from his son: "You killed the woman I loved. You ruined my life. You no longer have a son. Noah." Lance kept this note and reread it every day. For the first time in many years, he began to understand the magnitude of his actions. But it was too late to fix anything. The local newspaper, the Yuma Sun, published a long article about the case under the headline, "Deadly Prejudice." Journalist Lisa Martinez wrote about how intolerance can lead to tragedy. Brenda Torres lived a short but dignified life. She found the courage to become who she felt she was. found love, and a job that brought her joy. She was killed not for her crimes, but for who she was. This should make us all think about the price of prejudice. The Brenda Torres case set a precedent in Arizona legal practice. For the first time, a crime motivated by transphobia received the maximum punishment. This sent a message to society that discrimination and violence against transgender people will not be tolerated. But for those who knew and loved Brenda, justice could not bring back what was lost. Noah lost not only his fiancée, but also his faith in family ties. Brenda's parents lost a daughter whom they never truly accepted. And the small community of Yuma learned that hatred can lurk even in those you consider to be defenders.